Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locker Room. This is Southland's podcast for men. We're trying to redeem men's conversations and talk about the right things in the right ways, which men are not always known for, in particular in the locker room. So you may be listening. You may be watching. We've started putting these on YouTube so that people can see our fancy new man cave here. You know, so
why not put this on GodTube?
Well, we wanted people to watch it, so there's that. You know, I am joined today by Nate. Sometimes he's referred to as Nathan by many people. Actually, I never call you that. Head,
it's all good.
It's your last name, and Jason Eaton, a newish member of our staff. So,
that's right. Big Reds fan.
He's wearing the Reds hat today.
Sure, big Barry Larkin guy.
Ooh, yes,
Chris Sabo,
number 11.
So, did he wear rec specs?
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Eric
third
Davis,
baseman.
Rob Dibble.
Eric Davis, number 44. He was my favorite player growing up, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had the 44 Magnum poster. That's what it was. But
I was a Cardinals guy.
Yeah,
so Vince Coleman, Ozzie Smith,
all those guys who did a lot of cocaine.
And they were fast.
Willie McGee. Yeah, everybody on cocaine is fast.
Field. Exactly. Speed you up a little bit.
That's right. Vince Coleman's like the last guy to steal over 100 bases, I think.
Is he?
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Yeah, all those guys were fast.
Yeah, they can fly.
Well, hey, real quick, just so everybody knows a little bit more about you than being a Cardinals fan and a big Reds fan, that kind of thing. Just introduce yourself to everybody. How long you been at Southland? What's your role now? And we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I started at Southland back in August of last year, so 2020, so not too long. Grew up in Berea, so in Madison County, not too far from here.
You're very
Went
good at
to
arts
UK.
and crafts. Like,
oh, man.
You can quilt.
Yeah. You need a wood bowl? I can do it. You need to crochet something? I can make you a little blanket for your baby, whatever you need. But grew up coming to Southland back in the Wayne Smith days for the singing Christmas tree.
Yeah, man.
The Easter cantatas. Are cantatas still a thing? No, but
I think it's like a crepe. It's like a thing you eat.
Yeah,
frittata is what that is.
And then in college, going to UK, came to 608 off and on until God called me to full-time ministry. So, that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Well, we've been glad to have you. You joined us in the year of COVID. So
that's right.
Yeah. All right.
Nate, survivor.
Yeah,
Nathan Head, and I joined staff in 2005. And when I came, I was the middle school pastor at our then Nicholasville campus, the only campus, and the high school pastor was none other than Scott Nickel. And about 6 months later, he pieced out and left me and others in the dust. But
you came east and I went west.
That's right, yeah. But it's been fun. So really been on staff for a while now, since 2005, and love it and just having a blast. And this season of ministry, this place has been so good to me and my family. And so, yeah. That's kind of me in a nutshell.
Well, you are each married, and this season of Locker Room, we're talking specifically about marriage, taking a lot of different kind of angles at it. And so take this opportunity to tell us about your wives, tell us how long you've been married, and then tell us about your kiddos, and then we'll kind of dive into why we've got the two of you in here today.
Sure. Yeah. So, met my wife at UK. We got married in 2004, so we're creeping up on 18 years this summer, and she's awesome. We're complete opposites in almost every fashion. I'm very introverted. She is very
except when you're
she is very introverted. I was sorry. Flip that.
You're the Macho Man Randy Savage on staff. What are we talking about here?
Just so everybody knows, Jason, first week on staff, came into my office in a Macho Man Randy Savage costume.
Just wanted to set the tone.
And gave me a Slim Jim. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Just wanted to set the tone for, hey, this is what you hired. This is what you got. You got crazy. So,
I like it.
So got married as she was finishing up her senior year at UK, and been married the whole 17 years, believe it or not.
How many? Yeah, been married the whole time. How many kiddos you have?
Yeah, so we have 3. We have 2. One daughter, Greenlee, who is in 7th grade, and we have Maris, who is in 1st grade, and she is 7. And then we have an almost 2-year-old that is adopted, named Esme. So,
all right.
Yeah.
All right, that's a good lead-in.
Yeah, so Nathan and my wife is Stephanie. And we got married right out of college. We were in Bible college. And so, you got to get married quick for obvious reasons, I think. But no, we got married out of school, and she was finishing up some college. I went to Ozark Christian College in Joplin, Missouri, so a small town, and did ministry just outside of there for a couple of years before I came on staff here. And so we were pretty newly married when we moved here to Lexington, and then started kind of figuring out what it would look like to start a family, and process that for a while. So I'll tell you more about that later.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've been married for 18 years, and in June it'll be 19 years. So we're planning the 20-year anniversary trip, which is a big deal. So
Gatlinburg.
got to include
Here we come.
Pigeon Forge.
Yeah.
no
Some
kids,
saltwater taffy and a T-shirt, babe.
no kids in the beach are the two requisite.
That's what makes it a
requirements for
vacation
me.
right there.
Exactly. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
awesome.
Our 20-year got hijacked by 2020, so yeah, we're going to catch back up on that one.
Yep.
So, all right. So you got 2 boys. You've got 3 children.
Three girls.
Three girls. Yes. And so
The ladies' man.
both of you are on here today because you guys, in the context of your marriage, y'all you made a decision to adopt. And so that's one of the things. It's interesting. I was in Joplin, Missouri this past Sunday preaching at a church, and one of the things I was bragging about our church is that one of the distinctives of Southland is you can walk around. You don't have to be here for long before you realize, like, man, there's a lot of people in this church who have chosen the path of adoption. Yep. And it's a great biblical picture of what God has done for us. I mean, I think it's one of the sweetest pictures we get in the Bible of how we've been adopted. And so talk a little bit, and whoever can go first, about, your family's unique story, what circumstances led up to you all deciding to do that, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Yeah, so early on in our pre-marriage counseling before we got married, it was obvious that one of the sticking points was which way you put the toilet paper on. Do you pull it under or do you do it over? And then how many kids do you
every
want? Oh, yeah,
time.
over. Yeah, that's the obvious answer. Yeah.
As opinionated as I am, I've never had an opinion
No
about
way.
that. Isn't that weird? Like,
Oh, my
I have
gosh.
opinions about everything.
It's like,
I don't really
if
care.
we eat and live indoors, it's over. I mean, we're not Neanderthals here.
Right.
Let's not be like, scratching like a cat for the...
Right. And then the second was, how many children do we want? I wanted 100 and she wanted 0. So we were trying to figure out, okay.
Somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere, where is that? And so we waited, I think 3, almost 4 years before we had our oldest. And then after that, when you have a kid, you're like so overwhelmed. Like, am I going to break this child? Like, I was so comfortable being at the hospital. They were like, "Do you want us to wheel her into your room?" And no. She's way better with you.
Y'all are doing a
the
good
nurses,
job.
Yeah, keep her with you.
There's this glass between us. She's warm and well fed. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then for whatever reason, between having our first and our second, we just had difficulty. It was like, okay, God, what is going on? It just took a long time, and then it just happened one day. And we're like, oh man, that was amazing. That was a longer break between 13 and 7 than what we had planned in our mind. And then after Maris, our 7-year-old, it was the same kind of thing. Like, okay, God, what are you doing in this? There's obviously a desire to have more children. My wife had came around to having more from 0 after the first one was so great, And so then we started kind of looking through just, okay, Lord, like, do we go try medicine? Do we see what's the problem? And just had this overwhelming piece of like, no, if God wants us to have, he can figure that out. If God wants us to have a child. And so when we first got married, before we had kids, we had went on a mission trip to Cuernavaca, Mexico, and served for a couple different times at going and seeing orphanages there. And God just totally broke our heart, and we were like, oh my gosh, like we had just never really thought. No one in my family that I know of has ever adopted children or done foster care or anything like that. And so I just, in the back of my mind separately and in the back of my wife's mind, just started thinking like, man, what would that be like to adopt one day, and how would we do that? And then, so we started looking into and thinking about, what are the options? And as we started kind of studying and trying to figure out, man, there are so many kids in foster care that need a home, and processing like, oh man, what age? How do we do this? What does that do to our children? How do we still, make them a priority in this process, because it does impact them? And we just felt like, man, God says, hey, you're to take care of and love orphans and widows. And we're like, okay, we just had this, once we came into agreement with that is a biblical principle and a biblical truth. We were like, man, we can't really say no to that. So let's just do it. And we didn't really know the outcome of any of them. We had 4 different children in our home over a 3-year period. One child we had 2 different times. Wanted to adopt all of them, but the process is just kind of grueling. And so, but that's kind of where we turned to start going, okay, man, this is something that God's called us to do. And we have a peace about it and a passion about it and an excitement about it. And no matter how hard it is, and it is really, really hard. And that we just knew that's what we wanted to do.
So your adoption has taken place through the foster care system.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
We'll come back to that in a moment. But tell your story a little bit, Nate.
Yeah, some similarities. We had been married for a few years and started, planning to have children, and so, we were a few years into that, and it's like, this is weird. We know what we're doing, we think, and it's not, adding up to Steph getting pregnant. So we started talking with some, doctors and trying to figure out fertility issues. So they checked the plumbing and all the awkward things that go along with that for both men and women. Right. And just took some kind of first small steps into the fertility side of things. And so I think we were 8 years into marriage, and something's not working right. So that delay was kind of interesting, and Steph immediate was like, let's adopt, boom, that's the answer. And it wasn't that I was opposed to it. I just need some time to process and probably, as guys can be, catch up to God's plan. Our wives are there much faster.
We can be a little slow sometimes.
Yes, we can. So I was guilty of that and just prayed through it, and man, my heart was in it, and so we just started to explore, what would that look like? And we wrestled through, do you do domestic, do you do international? We chose international. There's great reasons for both. We, in our mind's eye, just thought we'd like for the adoption. Our heart was international, I think, just because of our orientation towards the world and the globe, and just a heart for, things beyond us. And then kind of as an extension of that, then we thought, man, let's go international. And so we started looking down that road. Practically speaking, for those that might be considering it, you have to wrestle through an open adoption or a closed adoption. Right. And the international, just the geographic boundaries and the finality of it meant we were just going to have our child, and there really wouldn't be a lot of connection, if any, to biological family. And so we just felt compelled to do that as we processed and prayed. So we went down the international route, found an agency and that we were comfortable with after we kind of vetted and learned about a few. And they had different programs, just countries they were working in actively for adoption purposes. They were a Christian organization. And so as we just prayed, we felt led to Ethiopia. It was one of the countries that they were working in at the time, and just kind of our hearts were slanted that way. And so we just felt drawn in that direction. And so through, Steph's heart for adoption, my heart that transitioned to going, let's do that. Let's pursue it. We went down that path, and, kind of the rest is history, so to speak. We adopted our oldest, Jordan, back in 2008. And that was just incredibly special, and I can talk more about that. But, early on, one thing as we were going down the fertility path that I remember God doing was just getting us to a place where it's it's okay to explore those things, and I don't begrudge anybody that does that. But, man, you almost have to step back and go, what's God up to? What is God up to? Like you described, I mean, we've practiced a lot, and we think we know what we're doing. I don't mind that, but at the same time, we had a heart to have children and, start a family. And so I think God pushed pause, because what happened is we had adopted Jordan. We were a couple years on the backside of that, and we were planning to adopt again. So I remember very distinctly, it was in the fall, and we had kind of figured out we were going to go back with the same agency that we adopted Jordan with. We were going to do international and planning on Ethiopia, so we'd have a sibling that would, share a lot of his background and backstory. And we were about to tell our families, and Steph got pregnant out of nowhere because we hadn't taken any more fertility steps.
Sure.
But we weren't preventing pregnancy or anything like that. And all of a sudden, man, it's like she's pregnant. And so we were just blown away. And it was like, you look back and go, God's timing. I can't explain it. I mean, I can kind of, as a pastor, sermonize some things that I think are true about God's heart and the plan he had for us. But that timing was just so fascinating to go. It was a no to have a biological child, and then it became a yes for us. And for others, that never happens.
Yeah.
They adopt, and God fulfills that, and they keep adopting, and that's great. And for some people, they adopt, and then they miraculously kind of have this biological child and, kind of go from there.
Right. It's almost like God knows, like, man, I don't know that, if we would have kept having more children, if we would have been open to the idea of fostering and adopting, if we would have met my goal of 50, if we would have went back and been like, man, there's room for one more.
Genghis Khan over here.
Your wife would have died.
Right,
There's so many people that have a similar story. I mean, we could have had Scott Hatfield back down here to tell a very similar story. I just don't want him to get the credit of being on the podcast most times than anybody else. He'd be up to like 5 or something. So I boycotted him from this season for a little while. But so many people have a very similar story of like trusted God, went ahead and adopted, and then, God went, okay, and again, that's not everybody's story, but you do hear it quite often, So talk about what's been challenging either during the process of adoption, the days following, the months, years, and then we'll transition into what's been awesome about it. Because I want us to make sure we are real about, this, what's been challenging about adoption.
I think the initial questions when you start doing it is because the best thing for that child in the foster care situation is that you love them like your own, that you treat them like they're just a part of your family. And so I think you kind of question, like, am I going to be able to do that? And I learned very, very quickly, yes, absolutely. That was not an issue for me.
Talk about the risk side of doing foster care in particular, because, I mean, you guys have walked through this where you wanted to adopt and then you didn't get to, and that child was in your home.
Yeah. You learn very, very quickly that you have zero say in the child's life, zero control, and really, unfortunately, rarely considered, in the process, which is very, very hard because when you go in, you're like, man, I'm with this child all the time. We're caring, providing. This child has been taken out of a very difficult situation and then placed in your care by the state to, and you fall in love with a child very, very quickly. And then you just have to be so open-handed, like we do with our own kids. I mean, they're God's children. He gives them to us to oversee for a season. And then we release that arrow, and that's kind of what we're called to do. So it's the same thing with foster care. It definitely has a different feeling, but it is hard, And
I think the tension that because we've not fostered,
right.
But like you start to learn some about the context from which they came,
right.
And by and large, you're going, man, we provide love and stability, and for whatever the disruption.
I would imagine you're going, what we have is better.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah.
Every time you're feeling
and
that
the goal
way.
of the courts, you can argue the benefits is reunification.
Yeah, 100% of the time.
And that's got to be a tough tension.
Oh, yeah. 100% of the time it's reunification. So much so that one of the kiddos that we had, so the way it kind of breaks down is you've got so many hands in the cookie jar. You've got the judge, you've got caseworkers. Each parent has an attorney. The child is appointed an attorney. There's CASA workers who represent, and so you're juggling all these people. You're the one that's with the child all the time. You're the one that's doing the hands-on, the loving, the caring, providing for the child. And yeah, you have no say, and then you realize very early on, because I'm very much a feeler, a lover, and so I open myself up completely quickly. And I remember one of our child's lawyers basically told us, "Hey, you just need to know that if we find any family member whatsoever, all they have to be is just barely good enough, and they're going to get this child." Mm-hmm. And we had some cases, one case in particular, the child that we had 2 different times that we thought, oh man, whenever he came back, we were like, oh man, we're going to get to adopt him. Like basically the family, the great grandma and the mom wanted us to have him. And the other thing that you learn is like, man, just how broken the system is. You know, I know they're doing their best, but man, it really does need prayer, it's just a broken system.
Sometimes your best still sucks.
Oh, yeah, right, right. Oh, yeah, yeah. And so it is the loving the child, providing for the child is the easiest part of it. It's dealing with all the processes, all the paperwork, all the different, just a funny thing. So, when you get a baby, so Esme, our almost 2-year-old, we got her right from the hospital, 4 days old, had her the whole time. Mom and dad were chronic transients, homeless for 7 years. They were never really a part of the process. So they knew early on, they were like, hey, is your intention to adopt? And we said, our intention every time we've done this is to adopt, hopefully. And so they were like, okay, because if not, we would probably move her to a different home because this is likely going to happen this way. It was just such a crazy process, with all that. But
well, I would imagine, my heart gravitates towards something C.S. Lewis said about love in regards to all love involves risk.
Right.
You can make sure your heart doesn't get broken if you want to, but in order to do that, you're going to have to wall off your heart in such a degree that it'll grow cold and die. So I would imagine a lot of people are listening to this going, man, that just sounds too risky. Well, every kind of love you have is risky, or it's not love,
Right.
And so you guys have had your heart wrung and broken, but at the same time, you've also had incredible, experiences of joy, and you've got Esme. And
oh yeah, yeah. We still have pictures of all the kids that we've had in our house. Every time they've come and they've left, we get a Christmas ornament with their picture on there. We talk about them all the time. Some family members have stayed in touch with us. Some viewed us like an enemy.
Sure.
You see the whole gamut of all that stuff, but it really is, you do get an opportunity to love on and be Jesus to these families. There was the little boy that I mentioned that we had twice. His mother was only 15. And so she had been lost into the system and was basically living with great grandma. And I kept telling my wife, Christy, I was like, can we adopt mom too?
Yeah, right.
She needs somebody. And it's just, man, your heart really does break for just the people that are involved. It's this chronic pattern. And I will say, for anybody that's out there that's thinking because I know I was skeptical at first, because you hear oh man, people do this just for money. Believe me, they don't do it for money. It's like you get a set amount, and I'm like, that doesn't cover diapers, doctors, food, clothes, all that stuff, because they literally come to you with maybe like a trash bag of soiled clothes, and you're like, all right, here we go, Lord, let's do this, So yeah, no one's making money off that.
Nate, you having Jordan who's older, Lincoln who's younger, Jordan who's black, Lincoln who's white, I'm sure there's some challenges there. One's your biological child, the other's not. What beyond that, even though, what have been challenges that y'all have faced?
Yeah, so one thing that's interesting, and everybody's heart's in the right place by and large. So we're doing this international adoption process, and you mentioned race, and so the international adoption agency that we went through, we had to do, and most adoptions do this. You have to go through all these classes basically, and so we're sitting through these hours of classes, all this coursework, and we're like, any old dummy can have a baby, and it's right. You know everything about us, you vetted us. Either we need a kid or not, and so we're doing all these things that you just kind of can be frustrating, but the end result's obviously great. But one of them that was really helpful was just trying to think through when you're bringing different ethnicity or different culture or both, in our case, into your home, here's what you'd be prepared for. Because really well-intentioned people can say really mean and awful things unknowingly. And neither Steph and I are easily offended, so I think that's been a grace to us, because, people genuinely don't. She'd get some looks at Walmart here she is, little white girl with a black baby, and they're kind of look at her odd, and people would say some things. Again, I don't think anybody was ever mean spirited, at least that that we experienced. But it's just it's a different situation where here's Jordan with two white parents, and he's clearly black, African American. So at any rate, on the challenging side of things, I think for us was trying to understand the dynamics of some of the developmental delays that can exist. Like we got Jordan when he was 6 months old, and so he'd had really good care relative to, I would say, his peers, if that makes sense. Sure. But there's still some things even now that I observe that it just didn't happen developmentally. And some of that comes out in like behavior, not a ton with Jordan, but they come out in all different ways. So other families that have adopted in any context, but certainly internationally, it's hard to calculate those costs on the front end. And even predating our relationship with Jordan that ended up being a match and adoption, the way it worked is, and I've told you this before, it's really peculiar. So if you've never been through it, like the agency we had, and I think other international agencies, I'm not sure about domestic, you basically have this long list of things that you will or you won't consider taking into your home. Mm-hmm. So when you have a baby, it's like there is no list. Yeah. Like you just are going to take what comes. And so that was a weird exercise to you feel like you're playing God a little bit, and that was a hard thing to do. And then we had gone through that, really prayed, processed, and it was pretty open. I mean, there were a few things that we just thought, hey, as first-time parents, this may not be the wisest thing for us to consider. And so we actually were sent a profile of a child, and so we were throwing a party like, here we go, here's our son, like so excited. And we had like a neurosurgeon look at it, somebody out of Cincinnati, I think, and they were like, hey, you just need to know that based on the pictures that we see, there could be some serious cerebral issues, like long-term, just significant issues. And so that hit us like a ton of bricks. And so we just weren't sure exactly what to do, and it broke our heart. And what's interesting about our agency, and I think other international agencies are like that, there's a waiting list of families who have said yes to any number of those kind of situations, all kind of medical challenges. And some of them are like, dad's a doctor, mom's a nurse, they have other kids, so they're like, we're built for this. Yeah. So ultimately, we just prayed and thought, first-time parents, like, if that list exists and he'll go right into a great home, let's do that. Yeah. So our hearts were broken and ripped out of our chest, and that was a hard thing to process. But I'll kind of put a bow around that story. So we ended up saying no so that child could be adopted in a family that's prepared to handle, some of those medical challenges that might surface. And we ended up adopting Jordan. He was the next match, profile in that regard. And so kind of the rest is history there. But through Facebook and others, we were able to actually track with that family, because the moms in all these agencies find each other and, kind of network, and they knew who's going and who can check on kids that are in like a transitional home and all that, and take pictures and that kind of thing. And it turns out he was perfectly healthy, and like he's in a great family, and, was just in such a good spot. But it was a heartbreaking moment when we realized, man, here's a child that's probably going to face a really challenging life. Do we feel equipped to do that? Should that even be a consideration? We just say yes and figure out the rest from there. And so at any rate, incredible how God's worked through that. And I look at Jordan and his fit in our family and in our home, and he's our, our first son in the family, through adoption. And so many similarities that he and I have from personality standpoint, which are cool. It's true. We're a lot alike in that regard, and then a lot of ways we're nothing alike. So it's kind of cool. But the hardships were there, and that's just a couple of the highlights along the way.
How's God used adoption specifically to, and I'll use the word that often is overused, but to bless your marriage?
I think, you have to be on the same page, with it. So there has to be a lot of open dialogue about
communication.
Feelings. Yeah. I mean, prayer together. Yeah. I mean, it has the potential to really be extremely difficult if you don't do it together. I'm somebody, it's like if I see something and I want it, I'll fight and work and pull, and my wife's less of a bulldozer in that sense. She'll sit and wait and be way more patient. And so really just kind of balancing each other out. I think for her, it gave me more assurance to be patient and like wait on God, and not just to be like, okay, our first one, we're adopting them, let's fight, let's like, blah, blah, you know, whatever. And I think for me, because I'm a, you know, fighter, I'll push through, I'll face hard challenges, take it, like, it made her, who's more just kind of easygoing, relaxed, go, okay, he's willing to do it, let's do it. And so I definitely think it does draw you in conversationally, prayerfully, in everything, just your feelings about the process, because it's constant. I mean, you know, in the adoption world, you could get we were literally going to a meeting that we were told, hey, this is not about this baby leaving your home. We walked in, we were like blindsided. They were like, tomorrow we're coming to your house to take the child. And the family was Spanish only speaking, and so they had brought another family member there, and literally they were celebrating and applauding in front of us that this baby that we've loved for 5 months is leaving our house, and we were, you know, man, we were crushed, and so there's just it can do wonders to bring you together and really seek the Lord together and talk about how you're, you know, feeling, which can be harder for guys. And so it was great.
I always tell people when I'm doing their weddings, like, you're willingly signing up to go through life's greatest joys and life's greatest sorrows together,
right,
you know,
right.
And there's benefit in both of those things. You know, they draw you together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think for us, some of the blessings in the adversity, you know, I would say this, and you didn't necessarily ask for this, but be careful, like, if you think that adopting or frankly having kids is going to help
fix
save your marriage,
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
that's not the case. Like, don't do that. Work on your heart and your marriage and invest in your spouse before you ever consider something like this. Because it'll put you through the ringer, and quite frankly, it could split up your marriage.
Oh yeah, that'd be like saying, we're not doing a very good job of playing basketball, let's try to play soccer at the same time. You know,
Man.
Yep.
Yeah, there's nothing that will show you how prideful you are until you have kids. It's like, man, then you got watching your own sins run around on 2 feet. And you're like, what is going on?
Yeah,
you know?
little mirrors.
I tell people, you know, when we got married, we realized how selfish we were, because all of a sudden it's not you calling all the shots on your own. And then when we had kids, we realized how angry we were. I didn't know I could get this angry at another human being. But, you know, the blessing has been through some of the adversity, quite frankly, you know, because, and I say this when I'm doing weddings, like, the adversity you face will make you stronger if you go through it together.
Right.
And it becomes a bond of intimacy that is not otherwise created. And if you're in marriage for the long haul for the right reasons, you don't pick adversity, you don't pick fights for the sake of that, but it is a clear blessing and a benefit. And that's some of the challenges leading into adoption, but then just having kids. So Jordan and Lincoln are no different, even though we don't share the same DNA. Like, the relationship I have with both of them is absolutely the same. And that's a hard thing to explain until you experience it.
Right.
But it's like, you know, you talk about God's heart for us. Man, there's days when you just feel like you're far from God because of your sin, and your 100th time committing that sin. And it's like, God loves you like a father, and there's nothing you can do to outlast his love. You know, you can't run too far away from him. But at any rate, that adversity creates a huge blessing in your marriage. And then just the joy, like, Jordan's into sports, I'm into sports, you know, and for Steph and I to be able to just watch him do what he loves and set goals and accomplish them and grow up. And that's the same for Lincoln too, you know, but there's something about that that's really special. And looking back on those days when we were preparing for adoption, we were going through the heartbreak of infertility, call it, even though neither of us were really technically infertile. You know, all that was just a training ground for God to soften our hearts for what he wanted to do through adoption, parenting, ministry, life, all those things.
All our kids are unique, you know, and I can look at my 4 and they all have such distinct personalities and things like that. But the other night, the ball field, you know, just stood out to me because Jordan's playing baseball and here comes Lincoln on his hoverboard, you know, just flying around on this thing, you know, and they're so unique from one another. And all kids are like that, but with those two, you know, it stands out because they're different races, you know, and it's just a beautiful picture. I mean, it really is just a beautiful picture of what adoption looks like into the Father's kingdom.
Yep.
It makes me smile every time I see him.
We plan on adopting and having a third child until Lincoln came along.
We're tapping out.
Yeah, like, you know what, Lord? We'll just call this our family for now, and if something comes up later, but he's awesome, and he's the mayor of everywhere he goes. Like,
Yes.
he just loves people, loves to be around them, and him just floating around on his hoverboard talking to everybody he sees is him in a
I
nutshell.
love it.
It's
Absolutely
also
love it.
cool what the process does for your biological kids. Like for us, I mean, to teach our girls that, hey, we're going to choose to love and step into this difficult thing with zero guarantee of any return of getting these kids, of them even knowing us, and too, just like trusting, like, okay, God, every night we're going to pray over these kids. We're going to pray the best things that we can over their lives, and we may never ever see those things ever, but just trusting that, man, okay, God called us to do it. He's going to use, whether it's a month, a year, 2 years, whatever that process is, and to be able to walk through the difficulty of seeing a child come and go with my biological girls, and them to learn, like, oh man, like sacrificial love is a powerful thing, and it's needed, and and so that's been a huge blessing outside of marriage with my wife, but with our girls, just seeing that, and just be able to walk through that and to say, hey man, when God calls us to do something, like we step into it, open-handed, and we, if God says do it, we don't delay, we do it immediately. Delayed obedience isn't obedience. So we just step into it no matter what.
It's a very parental thing you just said, right? You've used that before. We've all used that before.
Oh, yeah. Hey, I tell them, hey, if we're the only one doing what's right, then we're the only one doing what's right. And so we just got to do it, So it's awesome for them too.
Well, and wrapping up, there's definitely men listening to this who, could be anywhere on the spectrum of young, not married, going one day I hope to be and want to have kids. Guys who are, maybe married, their kids are grown, and everything in between. What would be kind of your pitch with the qualification of, please don't adopt children trying to fix yourself or fix your wife or fix your marriage?
Right.
But beyond that, those qualifications, what would be your pitch for adoption?
Yeah, I would say for everybody that physically can, to pray about it and just say, okay, God, is this something that you would ask for me to do for a season, or for, a short season, a long season? And then, God's not going to confirm something inside of your spirit that he's not going to confirm inside your wife. And so you never want to do something just because you want to do it. I know that if I'm like, okay, I really feel like God's saying this, and if she's saying no, then I don't need to step into it. You have to be in agreement when you're stepping into something like that. And I think it's an awesome thing, even though, we did all that when we were in Texas, and now that we're home, we're not licensed for Kentucky, and we've just been praying like, okay, we know it was a very hard 3 years. But it was like, oh my gosh, but it was so worth it. Look at Esme. We've had her. She's ours, it's no different. Like you said, it's like, man, she's ours, and, it was worth it. And so I would just say, pray about it. Make sure that you and your spouse are in agreement about it, and then walk through it together. It's definitely worth stepping out and doing it. And it's such a huge need.
Yeah. It was cool to see how our church responded recently to just people wanting to get information about being foster care parents,
Absolutely. Yeah. And we can help figure that out for anybody,
Yep. Yeah, I'd say kind of an extension of what you described. I'd just encourage people to consider adoption first. If they're not married or on the way, or just haven't started family planning yet, consider that first. The Bible's really clear, like pure and faultless religion.
Yeah.
Like
James 1:27, man.
You can hit the bullseye on the people like, I wonder what God's will is for my life.
Yeah.
Well, I can show you what's on one of the bullseyes of the target. Like, you don't have to ask any questions, care for orphans and widows. And you look at the state of Kentucky, and I haven't seen the statistics recently, and they're probably even worse than when I would have seen them. But it's interesting, the number of, the direct corollary, the number of kids in the foster system and the number of churches in the state. And I think it's almost like if every church adopted one child, the problem would be wiped out. So I would say, as fellow Christ followers, we've got a pretty clear biblical mandate to consider that first amongst anything else. We want to be fruitful and multiply and, fill the earth in that regard too. But man, there's just such a great need, and you'll never have to apologize to your Father in heaven for doing what he asked you to do and be obedient the way you guys described. Like, just go, man, like there's nothing fuzzy about it. Like, you don't have to wonder, guess, like it's crystal clear. If you consider bringing an orphan, in a general term, and there's other ways to support orphans and widows. One of those ways, Orphan Care Alliance is an organization we partner with out of the Louisville area. They've got a presence all across the state. And there's ways beyond even fostering. You can be kind of like a provider of respite, which means you can care for families that are fostering or adopting. You can just kind of fill in some gaps that you go, man, we can't right now in this season. That's okay. There's other ways to get involved. And so Orphan Care Alliance is one that we partner with. Is a really good one. There's others out there, but I consider adoption first and pray and just kind of go from there.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, thank you both. It is one of my favorite things about our church, and you two are just two examples of it, and there's many, many more. And so thanks for sharing a little bit of your stories. There's a lot more to it. But hey, everybody, thanks for listening to Locker Room. Please share this with your friends and catch us next time. Peace.